Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson joins us now. He, as you know from watching him on this show and elsewhere, is a champion of the Constitution and of sound money. Senator Johnson, it's a pleasure. Welcome back.
Well, Judge, thanks for having me on.
I want to start with the president's failure to say he wouldn't do something. Now, you may say it's unfair to say, well, he's going to do it because he wouldn't say that he wouldn't do it. But he had a golden opportunity to say, I will follow the Constitution, I will follow the law, and I'm not going to borrow money unless the Congress authorizes it. He didn't do that. His people have put out this crazy idea that somehow the president can borrow money and spend it without authorization by the Congress, when, as you know, the Constitution says only the Congress can do that.
Yeah, last time I looked, it's pretty well Congress has the power of the purse here. But first of all, Judge, there's no reason for that. I continue to talk about what I call the debt ceiling budget. If we failed to increase the debt ceiling, what would that mean? We would actually have to live within our means. And according to the president's own budget, that would be $2.6 trillion. And again, let's put that in context. That's $800 billion more than we spent just 10 years ago under Bill Clinton. It totally pays for all the interest on the debt, 100% of Social Security, pay for the soldiers, and still leaves probably about $1.5 trillion for all other essential services and spending. So there's no reason to put ourselves in a crisis mode if we would act responsibly. And the problem is the president simply is not acting responsibly. He's scaring the American people. He's scaring the markets.
Senator Johnson, are more and more Republicans beginning to think and to speak as you just did? The reason I ask that is because, as you know, Freedom Watch has invited a lot of your colleagues to come on here, and we always address this issue. Will you vote to raise the debt ceiling under any circumstances? And many of them, like you, have said no. We've also asked presidential candidates, Governor Gary Johnson from New Mexico, Congressman Ron Paul from Texas, and just a few minutes ago, Herman Cain. Those three have said no. No to the debt ceiling. The government must live within its means. Question, are more and more Republicans beginning to believe that, and will more and more Republicans in the Congress vote that way when they do vote sometime between now and August 2nd?
Well, Judge, what I've always said is I'm not going to vote to increase the debt ceiling until we solve the problem, until we prevent the bankrupting of America. And what I can tell you, there's a growing group of members of the Senate and of the House that actually would be willing to increase the debt ceiling if we solve the problem. And you're about ready to see a couple pieces of legislation, or a piece of legislation, probably in the Senate.
Right.
And I was just talking to a bunch of House members as well about actually having the House pass the cut, cap, and balance piece of legislation. And what it does is it cuts spending in 2012 and 2013. It institutes and enacts statutory caps to start putting us on a glide path toward a balanced budget. And then it actually increases the debt ceiling, but it's contingent on us passing a balanced budget amendment that we send to the states. And again, in the end, I think the only way we save this nation from bankruptcy is to have that constitutional limitation on the size of government and balancing the budget. Well, and again, if we could do that, there's a growing group of people that would be willing to increase the debt ceiling, because then we will have solved the problem.
But
and
Senator,
that's what I'm here to do, is to solve the problem.
Senator, you know that raising money today by borrowing it, that money will be spent long before any debts, balanced budget amendment is passed by the states. You know it takes 2/3 of each House of Congress to send an amendment to the states. You know it takes 3/4 of the states to ratify it. You know that that time will take a couple of years. And more importantly, I think you know that the present Congress, of which you are a member, cannot bind or control a future Congress.
I know.
So what is the value of a promise today by President Obama and the Democrats not to spend money tomorrow when we don't even know who's going to be in office tomorrow?
And Judge, I understand all those problems, but again, that's why you cut today. You actually do real cuts this time for 2012 and 2013, and you have that statutory cap that has real teeth to it. It's a real solid straitjacket, but that's why you end up having to pass the balanced budget amendment, because let's face it, I realize it, my colleagues realize, if you only have a statutory cap, at some point in time Congress will find a way to weasel their way around that. So again, you have the three elements.
All right.
So again, I think that's a reasonable approach.
All right. Switching gears before we let you go. I understand it that the Senate was about to vote on a resolution authorizing the president to continue fighting an undeclared war in Libya, and that Senator Reid removed the resolution from the floor because he didn't have the votes. Senator,
Right.
what is a Congress to do when a president assumes to himself powers that the Constitution gives to the Congress, the powers to wage war? Should the Congress sit by like a potted plant, or should the Congress stop him?
Well, first of all, Judge, I didn't sit by. Last Tuesday, I stood up on the floor of the Senate and I said, until we start addressing the #1 problem facing this nation, which is the fact that we are bankrupting it, I was going to begin to object. I was going to begin to withhold my consent, and I have. So when Senator Harry Reid brought up that resolution on Libya that basically would have supported this president's action, as muddled as it is, I objected. And then I felt a great deal of support by my Republican colleagues, so we got on the phone over the weekend. I called Republican colleagues, and as a unified group, we said we are not going to move to this Libya resolution until we solve the nation's debt and deficit problem. And that's what happened.
Senator, it's a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Judge.